Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera, salam perjuangan, salam perpaduan. Salam UiTM di hatiku. Salam Melaka berwibawa, pintar, hijau, bersih. Sagodri, sagodri gele, vanakkam. 这边有好人吗？你好吗？该发halukum？马来人、华人、印度人，我们的一家人，大家好。Before we begin our presentation today, I would like to introduce my group members. First, my name is Mohamad Hafiz bin Abdul Rahman.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nur Yasmeen binti Zulkifli.
Assalamualaikum and hello to my fellow classmates and my lecturer. My name is Aida Nabilah binti Azman.
I am Nur Amani Syahirah binti Man.
Let's begin with the introduction of Sabah. Sabah is one of 13 states in Malaysia, found in Borneo and an island shared among Malaysia, Brunei and Indonesia. Sabah and Sarawak, which obtained colonial status in 1946, are administered internally from the Malay states of Peninsula, Malaysia and Singapore and each other. 1881, the British North Borneo National Bodies Company was established and began administrating a territory on the island of Borneo, which was revised by the Sultan of Brunei and Sultan Sulu. Much later known as Sabah, the North Borneo province was made British protector in 1888, still administered by the company, which also held Labuan until 1906, when it was joined to the Straits Settlement. Paper will examine many of the previously proposed ideas behind Sabah name by examining various evidence.
Next, we move to Malaysia or Philippines claims over Sabah and the history. The case for Sabah relates to the Sulu Sultanate. The Sultanate used to rule over parts of the southern Philippines and Sabah, and claims that Sabah was only leased and not ceded. The claim was dropped in the 1987 Constitution. In 2009, Sabah was written out of Philippines legal. In 2013, on heir of the Sulu Sultanate, Jamalul Kiram launched an armed assault on Sabah in the name of reclaiming his rightful territory. The next one, history behind the claim. The root of the dispute lies in the contract of 1878 between the Sulu Sultanate, which at that time controlled Sabah and British North Borneo Company. When World War II ended, Sabah was handed over British. Philippines has maintained contract signed in 1878. Malaysia is paying to Sulu. The Manila Agreement was signed by Malaysia, the Philippines and Indonesia. The Manila Accord has been used a number of times by Sulu.
I would like to talk about Sabah political. On 9 May 2018, Malaysia underwent a peaceful change after over than 6 decades of rule by Barisan Nasional and UMNO. While many articles have been concentrated on why UMNO lost control, a little attention has been paid to the political dynamics in Sabah and Sarawak. In 2016, Shafi Abdal, UMNO's vice president, has been sacked from federal cabinet after he questioned Najib Razak regarding the 1MDB scandal. About pendatang asing tanpa izin to Sabah. This issue is unique to Sabah. Over the past 4 decades, Malaysia has seen a rise in the flow of foreign nationals. The entry of Filipino and Indonesian migrants to Sabah has been well known to the colonial era as they were working as the plantation farm worker.
To the Sabah dispute. The dispute is about the claim of both countries over of the eastern parts of Sabah, one of the Malaysia's 13 states. Sabah was previously known as North Borneo before the formation of the Malaysian Federation in 1963. To note, Peninsular Malaysia was restructured as the Federation of Malaya in 1948, a federation of what previously had been British Malaya, comprising 11 states that existed from 1st February 1948 until the 16th of September 1963. and achieved their independence on 31st August 1957. And formally emerged Malaysia with the inclusion of Singapore, North Borneo, Sabah, and also Sarawak on 16 September 1963 when Malaysia inherited the British colonial enterprise in the northern Borneo. Therefore, the Sabah and North Borneo dispute, as it is often referred to, remains unresolved until today, and it continues to be speck in the eye and unsettling thorn in the bilateral relations between Philippines and Malaysia, which has subsisted for over 2 decades. In centuries, parts of Sabah East were ruled by the Sulu Sultanate, a Muslim state which ruled several islands across Mindanao, Palawan, and also Borneo. The Sultanate in 1878 signed an agreement handing the territory over to the North Borneo Chartered Company (NBCC), a British colonial company tasked to exploit the resources in North Borneo. In 2013, the Philippine Senator Miriam Defensa Santiago said in a speech,
"When there is a territorial dispute between two or more states, international law requires that the states in conflict with each other must avail only of peaceful means of settlement of dispute." Sometimes they use the word pacific means of settlement of disputes, meaning to say that war is legal under international law for proving that a state has the right of sovereignty over a certain territory claimed by another state. That, of course, applies to the dispute over Sabah by the Philippines and Malaysia.
Let's move to maritime and strategic consideration. The surrender was synchronized by the Secretary-General of Malaysia never recognizing the Republic of the Philippines to the state of Sabah, which is the master of North Borneo. The proposed extension of continental shelf submitted by Malaysia to UNCLCS logically and roughly covers 2/3 of the Kalayaan Island Group territory as well as most of the Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone. On March 6, 2020, the Philippine government, through a delegation to the UN from the Philippines, filed a verbal protest note on Malaysia's request. The diplomatic note reads, Malaysia's submission covers the characteristic of the Kalayaan Island Group where the Philippines has sovereignty. Malaysia also submitted an oral note to the United Nations on 27 August 2020 which claimed that it would also like to inform the Secretary-General of Malaysia has never recognized the claim of the Philippines Republic to the state of Sabah, formerly known as North Borneo. Under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, a region of 200 nautical miles, 370 kilometers from the territorial sea base of a country, its exclusive economic zone, where it can use sovereign rights to use natural resources and jurisdiction to establish facility and structure.
The Permanent Mission of Malaysia to the United Nations also submitted a verbal note to United Nations. The submission claimed that to inform Secretary General that Malaysia has never recognized the claim of Philippines to Sabah.
Next, Philippines claim over Sabah. Sabah is situated on the northeast tip of Borneo, about 500 kilometers from the Philippines. While Malaysia controls the territory, the Philippines has claimed responsibility for Sabah since 1961. The first official attempt by Philippines to claim Sabah was on 22nd June 1962, when the Philippines filed a claim on Sabah against the United Kingdom. The Philippines explained to the United Kingdom government the past and legal basis of its claim to Sabah and the source of the conflict. United Kingdom is a party to the conflict since it was responsible for handing over Sabah to Malaysia. Sabah was initially governed by the Sultanate of Brunei in the early 1500s under the Sultan Bolkiah.
Nabilah put the issue on the back burner for a long time to cultivate good relations with her neighbour, but realized the long silence would never bring the matter to a close. Notice that the people of Sabah were allowed to join the Malaysian Federation by the United Nations UN Secretary-General in August 1963, given the findings of the Colbert Commission of 1962, which was set up to assess the consent of the people of Sabah, Sarawak, and to evaluate their voices whether they should join the Federation of Malaysia. It was noticed that the general public supported the Malayan Union, which led to the signing of the Malaysian Agreement in London on 9 July 1963. Accordingly, the agreement specifically stated that Sabah, along with Sarawak and Singapore, is part and parcel of the Federation of Malaysia. Since then, Sabah has been under the direct control of Malaysia. Malaysia's claim over Sabah was very dependent on the validity, legality, and credibility of the claims of the United Kingdom, especially over back and then over Sabah, on the basis of the grant and concessions of the Treaty 1878 and their effect, because Malaysia was the former colony of Britain. Likewise, Malaysia considers the Philippine claims over Sabah to be a non-issue, as Sabah in 1963, along with Sarawak and Singapore, was part and parcel of the founding states of the Federation of Malaysia, which was thus an act of self-determination by the Sabah people. Sabah has been a focal point in relations between Malaysia and the Philippines since the Federation of Malaysia formally entered into force in 1963.
We move to Sulu tribe. The diplomatic relations between Malaysia and Philippines are still in cooperation, but there are conflicts with emergence of territorial rights on Sabah.
Let's continue to Waris, Sabah, which anchor from the Sulu Century Sultanate and historical Filipino law for Sabah and canons from the Philippine modern time. The regional debate does not appear indigenously and naturally on the boots of the ideal that owns is a colonial product. Through placement and ascension, lines have been taken on the map, creating unnatural boundaries which cut obediently and indeed bunch or telephone regions without genuine physical division through overview and physical examination. The Philippine-Malaysia reciprocal relation from the beginning started were with some degrees for the central part of the treaty of the two countries were enclosed on the issue of regional such as land and sea debate. The two countries are student into the water of the South China Ocean, and the second has competing claims over Sabah, which well known as North Borneo.
For the conclusion of our Sabah, Malaysians or Philippines, the undoubtedly dispute between Philippines and Malaysia has left to mistrust. The Sabah conflict can either be idle or amplify the current state of affairs. The conflict between Philippines and Malaysia remains largely unexplained until today.
There is no clarification or agreement to this day whether Sabah has indeed been handed over the British or not to the Sultan of Sulu, or whether it has just been leased to them. One thing is certain of that. Moreover, in 1963, Sabah along with Sarawak and Singapore was ceded to Malaysia by the United Kingdom to form the Federation of Malaysia. The Sabah conflict will therefore continue to be a thorn in bilateral relation between Malaysia and the Philippines until it is finally resolved. As to when it will eventually be resolved, it is still need to be ascertained. As a result, the problem remains undetermined as it has been for so many years.
Besides, it was harsh and sensitive issue about the great relation delighted Malaysia and Philippines of participation within the Asian coalition. On 1962, The citizens of Sabah had decided their right within the workout of their self-determination for Sabah to be the portion of Malaysia. On September 14, 1963, United Nations Secretary General had reported to the United Nations General Assembly that the people of Sabah had chosen to join Malaysia.
And the UN and the international community have recognized Sabah as an inseparable, unalienable and integral part of Malaysia. The question of their claim towards Sabah has been 3 decades until now. There is no solution to handle and take over these crucial issues. The issue is still at the highest level and it might affect Malaysians living in Sabah as well as the state will be affected too. Both countries should handle the crisis effectively.